Draco Malfoy, and the year when everyone suddenly paid attention to him. By Draco will hear about this. Chapter 15. A new chapter. The days leading up to Dumbledore's funeral were, perversely, some of the most peaceful ones Draco had ever spent at Hogwarts. For one, classes and exams were cancelled. Some students were taken home immediately by their parents, amongst them the Patil twins and Smith, but many elected to stay. Amongst them, Finnegan, who even went as far as getting into a shouting match with his mother to secure his remaining at the school. She only agreed once she had found an accommodation at Hogsmeade, a task that seemed impossibly difficult now that wizards from all over the world were streaming into the village for the funeral. Draco spent most of his time surrounded by his friends, and he was a little amazed to realize what a tight-knotted group they had now become. Ginny, Ryan, Luna, and Eureka would just casually join them out on the grounds, and eventually they'd be sitting in a big group, all of them gathered from Longbottom to Viola and Yatin, Zoe and Karina to Abbas and Demelza Robbins, and a couple of Hufflepuffs he had not even met before, but somehow seemed to be connected to Demelza and Abbas. Draco, especially curious when that last pairing had come to be, asked them once whether they were dating, only to be met with an incredulous stare by Abbas and hysterical giggles by Demelza. "Merlin, no!" she wheezed, glancing at Abbas in mirth. "Even if we had any chemistry at all, Abbas is hopelessly smitten with Gillian." "I'm not!" Abbas argued, though the way he flushed brightly gave it away as a lie. "Gillian?" Draco asked, eyebrows raised. "Isn't that the dark-haired Hufflepuff you keep bringing over?" Demelza opened her mouth to respond, but Abbas clasped a hand over her mouth, keeping her from responding. "I don't fancy him!" he hissed, eyes wide. "Don't listen to her!" Draco carefully scanned his face, something painful pulling at his chest, and he frowned. "You know, there's nothing wrong with it if you do." Abbas shrugged, making Abbas tense. "It's not like we can help our feelings. And he seems like a nice enough bloke. Plus, mate, we're heading straight for a war. It's better to get real about your feelings than live with regrets." Abbas just stared at him, unable to answer, and Draco gave him a sheepish shrug before retreating, leaving the two of them to it. He found Harry, Hermione, and Weasley sitting at the lakeside, for once just the three of them, and he dropped a kiss on the top of Harry's head as he joined him. "Hey," Harry said, glancing over at him. "Where were you?" "Playing Slytherin figurehead," he grinned. When Harry only frowned at that, he added, "Nothing dangerous, I swear. I just played Ginny to Abbas's Harry." "Oh," Harry muttered, blinking as his meaning sank in, and he snorted. "That must have come across well." "To be fair, I was nice about it," Draco shrugged. "Much nicer than a certain redhead we both know." He got Harry's eyes and was a little thrown by the intensity with which Harry was watching him. That happened a lot lately, Draco had noticed. He would catch Harry watching him, that faraway look in his eyes, like something was haunting him. It had been there since the night Dumbledore died, and Draco wondered if he had put it there when he had thrown himself between Harry and Snape's wand. It was not the first time something like that had happened, though. It couldn't have been such a shock to him, right? And then Harry leaned in to kiss him, fingers tangling in his hair to hold his head in place, and his lips moving against Draco's ever so tenderly. He kissed him like Draco was going to disappear any moment. It was disconcerting. When Harry pulled away, he lingered in Draco's personal space, guiding Draco's head so their foreheads rested against each other's. He did not speak. He just gently ran his hands through Draco's hair and breathed him in. "Everything okay?" Draco breathed, reluctant to break the silence, but still needing to ask. Harry just nodded, but he didn't open his eyes, and Draco knew he was lying. As the days passed, more Ministry officials arrived at Hogwarts for the funeral. They avoided them best as they could, wary of everything to do with the Ministry by now. Instead, they paid a lot of visits to the hospital wing. Bill was still there, under Madame Pomfrey's care, his wounds slowly healing, though he had been incredibly lucky. His only wolfish symptoms seemed to be his new liking for raw meat. Other than that, he was in good spirits, and Fleur seemed remarkably more at ease once Miss Weasley was nowhere in sight. Madame Maxime arrived shortly before the funeral, too. in the same carriage she had used in 4th year. They saw her throw herself tearfully at Hagrid upon her arrival. The strangest thing, though, about their time left at Hogwarts was Not's empty bed in the 6th year's Slytherin dormitory. Draco looked over at it every night with a heavy feeling in his chest, wondering where Not was now, what the Dark Lord was making him do. It's my fault. He tried not to think it, but he could not shake the feeling off completely. Theodore Nott was under the Dark Lord's control because Draco had escaped it, and that little gnat of guilt would always be there. They were set to leave with the Hogwarts Express an hour after the funeral. Hagrid was absent from the staff table at breakfast that morning, leaving 2 seats to be filled by ministry officials, since Snape naturally was still missing, who turned out to be none other than Scrimgeour himself, and to Weasley's displeasure, Percy Weasley. Dumbledore's chair remained empty as a gesture of respect. They were supposed to follow their heads of houses out onto the grounds. But at this point no one bothered to listen, and they grouped themselves wherever they wanted. He saw Demelza and Abbas with the Hufflepuffs, Eureka with the Ravenclaws, Ginny with the Slytherins, which he followed Professor McGonagall. He saw Demelza and Abbas with the Hufflepuffs, Eureka with the Ravenclaws, Ginny with the Slytherins, while he followed Professor McGonagall down with the Gryffindors. And none of the teachers bothered to say anything. He thought they silently approved because Dumbledore would have been pleased. They were led towards the lake, where chairs had been placed around a marble table at the front. Draco took a seat between Harry and Longbottom. Hermione and Weasley sat on Harry's other side. As the seats slowly filled, Draco watched the people that arrived, recognizing Order members as well as famous members of Wizarding Society, ministry officials, and random people he had met here and there or that he couldn't even place. Dumbledore had touched the lives of many people, Draco knew. It made sense that his funeral was to be a mass event. He spotted Dora and Lupin a few rows down, holding hands. It warmed his heart a little. He was glad to see that they had worked out their differences at last. Both were dear to him, and they deserved happiness. The Weasleys, apart from Ginny and Weasley himself, stuck together, Fleur supporting Bill on his way to win. The Weasleys, apart from Ginny and Weasley himself, stuck together, Fleur supporting Bill on his way into his seat, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley by their side, followed by Fred and George, who seemed to be wearing black dragon skin jackets. Draco glanced at Harry, only to see his eyes fixed on the figures of Cornelius Fudge and Dolores Umbridge, his jaw clenched, green eyes blazing in fury. Draco reached out to take his hand, enlacing their fingers. Harry took a steadying breath, squeezing his fingers. It made the scars on the back of his hand stand out, and made the matching ones on the back of Draco's own tingle. Draco's eyes traveled out over the lake, and with some astonishment he saw the mer people swimming just inches below the surface, and now that he concentrated, he could hear music reaching his ears across the murmur of voices, a melody of despair or loss. A hush went through the crowd, and Draco's head turned to find Hagrid carrying Dumbledore's body down the aisle towards the marble table. Draco squeezed Harry's hand to gently direct his attention to where it needed to go, his own eyes lingering on the tears rolling down Hagrid's face. Dumbledore's body was wrapped in purple velvet, interlaced with golden stars. Draco knew it was Dumbledore inside, but his mind didn't seem to quite make the connection, instead going numb. He could hear Hermione crying a few seats down, along with other people, but somehow the feeling of grief wouldn't take hold of him. What did that say about him? Once Hagrid had reached the front, he placed the body on the table and retreated. He passed them again to take a seat far in the back, and with some surprise, Draco realized that he sat with a well-behaved, silent Grop. When Hagrid took his seat, Grop patted his head, making Hagrid's chair legs sink into the ground. When had that happened? Why hadn't he bothered to ask Hagrid about Grop throughout the year? Hagrid was his friend and Grop was his family. He should have asked, at least. Someone had gotten up to hold a speech. Draco thought he distantly recognized the man from some of his parents' social gatherings when he was younger, but he could not recall his name. He could not be bothered to, either, and he could not bring himself to listen. Instead, he shut the world out and reflected what Dumbledore's death made him feel. The emotion came crashing down on him as soon as he closed his eyes and stopped looking at the scene in front of him. Fear. He was terrified of the future ahead. He was not sure if he had always trusted Dumbledore's judgment, but there was no doubt that he had considered Dumbledore as a source of safety for himself, Harry, his family, and all his other friends. Now, they were on their own. Sure, the Order was still intact, and they would still help each other, but how effective would it be without Dumbledore at the top? Dumbledore had been the mastermind of the operation. And there were still the Horcruxes, all of which they now had to hunt down on their own and find a way to destroy, too. How are they going to do that without Dumbledore's guidance? There was a soft noise from his side, and Draco opened his eyes to find tears running down Harry's face. It hurt him deep in his soul to see it, the look of despair and loss on his boyfriend's face. How was it that again and again, Harry had to lose people he treasured, and try as he might, Draco could do nothing to stop it? The speech had ended, and the man had stepped away, but Draco's eyes were still on Harry's face. Then people screamed, and he finally turned back to watch what was happening at the front. The table had suddenly been engulfed in bright white flames that rose high enough to hide the body from their view, and then it vanished again, a marbled tomb remaining on the table, encasing Dumbledore's body. There was a shower of arrows that fell short of the crowd. Draco turned to see the centaurs who had lingered just at the edge of the forest retreat. The mer-people, too, sank slowly back into the waters and were lost from view. Draco turned back to face Harry, only to find the other boy's eyes already on his. He had that strange, haunted look on his face again, and Draco knew before he opened his mouth that Harry was going to say something incredibly stupid, and that he was not going to let him get away with it. Draco, listen, Harry muttered, gulping. I can't. We have to stop. I can't keep doing this anymore. Draco's heart stopped for a moment. Then he shook himself out of it, and he shook his head decisively, his face hard. No, he said simply. You don't get to do this. Harry's expression was pained as he stared back at him. You have to understand, he whispered. The last thing I want is to lose you. You've been the best thing in my life, but that's exactly why I can't do this anymore. If this is because of what I did in front of Snape, Draco began. Yes and no. Harry shook his head. You will always be in danger around me, Draco. He's used you as a bait to get to me before, and he will do it again. He would hurt you just to hurt me. And the one thing I couldn't stand is to lose you. That is terribly heroic of you, Draco snapped. That is terribly heroic of you, Draco snapped, unable to help himself. But have you ever considered that I might be in even bigger danger if you just leave me behind? Harry gaped at him, satisfiedly stumped. I don't, he muttered. I give up everything for you, Draco reminded him. I turned my back on my father. My mother turned her back on my father, leaving a target almost as big on our heads as on yours. So even if you break up with me now, they'll always be out for my blood. So tell me, Draco challenged, jaw set, how would you feel if they got to me and murdered me after you left me behind, doing your own thing because you thought I would be safer on my own? With grim satisfaction, Draco realized that he'd gotten his point across. Harry looked thunderstruck and despaired. But, he whispered, and his eyes were filling with tears again. But what if you get killed because of me? I couldn't live with myself if... Harry! Draco interrupted him, voice gentling again as he reached out to touch his... cheek. This is a war. People will always die, but I choose to be at your side, fully aware of what the consequences might be. And if that ends in my death, I'm sorry, but I'll take it over staying away from you. Because for me, that would be the option I could live with. Surviving in a world without you, knowing I could have stopped your death if I had just stuck with you. A tear ran down Harry's cheek and he leaned in to kiss it away. "We're a team," he breathed. "We have been since first year, and we will be till the very end. So don't you dare choke me out now, not even for my own good. I don't want it. I refuse it. So save your breath and accept that you're stuck with me, you moron."
"You're such a stubborn horse,"
Harry muttered, his voice trembling.
"You won't even let me save you."
"I don't need saving," Draco snorted. "I'm not a damsel in distress, Potter. I just need you. Got it?" Harry sighed, and Draco knew from the way the tension left his shoulders that he had won the fight.
"Fine," he breathed. "But if you die on me, I'll never forgive you."
"Same," Draco smiled, leaning in to catch Harry's lips and a soft kiss. Harry clung to him, kissing him back desperately, and now Draco finally understood why Harry had kissed him the way he had in the last couple of days. It had been his way of saying goodbye. Idiot! As if Draco would ever be through with him. When Harry had calmed down enough to compose himself, he pulled away from Draco, wiping in his face. Draco caught a glimpse of Hermione and Weasley behind him. Hermione was sobbing into Weasley's shoulder, and the ginger git was holding her tight, for once, stepping up to the job. Draco was loath to interrupt their moment, so he reached out for Harry's hand and pulled him to his feet. "Let's go for a walk," he muttered, leading him past Longbottom down their row until they were out on the grass. From here, they strolled down back into the direction of the castle, the path that led towards Hagrid's hut and the Quidditch pitch. They did not get far, though, because they were joined by someone rather unwelcome.
"Harry!"
"Heavy!" Scrimgeour called out to them, making the two of them halt as the minister caught up, heavily leaning on his walking sticks. "I've been meaning to have a word. I've been hoping to have a word. Do you mind if I walk a little with you?" Draco rolled his eyes. Harry glared, but shrugged, his demeanor indicating indifference as he replied, "No," before he started walking again, pointedly not letting go of Draco's hand. Scrimgeour looked at Draco distastefully for a moment, but he bit his tongue. He seemed to be picking his battles carefully.
"Harry, this was a dreadful tragedy," he began. "I cannot tell you how appalled I was to hear of it. Dumbledore was a very great wizard. We had our disagreements, as you know, but no one knows better than I—"
"What do you want?" Harry interrupted him, his voice sharp. Draco had to suppress a smile. The minister, on the other hand, looked less pleased, but he quickly schooled his features into compassion, trying once more.
"You are, of course, devastated."
"Minister," Draco interrupted him, speaking for the first time, "let me give you some advice on Harry. He's not good at diplomacy, and it's usually wasted on him. So you'd better stop the pretense and just say what you came here to say, because his patience has already run out." Scrimgeour glowered at him, but Draco just shrugged. Finally, Scrimgeour turned back to Harry, his mask completely fallen now.
"The word is that you were with him when he left the school the night that he died," he brought out at last.
"Whose word?" Harry asked.
We found two broomsticks on top of the tower after Dumbledore died. The Ministry can add 2 and 2, Harry."
"Glad to hear it."
"Glad to hear it."
Draco looked away, biting down on a grin. Serious as the situation was, he loved Harry like this.
"Well, where I went with Dumbledore and what we did is my business. He didn't want people to know."
"Such loyalty is admirable, of course," Scrimgeour ground out. "But Dumbledore's gone, Harry. He's gone."
"He will only be gone from the school when none here are loyal to him."
Harry disagreed with a soft smile.
"My dear boy, even Dumbledore cannot return from the—"
"I'm not saying he can. You wouldn't understand, but I've got nothing to tell you."
Harry shook his head, his tone final. Scrimgeour hesitated, and then he said in a different tone,
"The Ministry can offer you all sorts of protection, you know, Harry. I would be delighted to play a couple of my orders."
"Don't you dare!" Draco hissed, fury running through him so overwhelming that it threatened to consume him completely. "After what you said this winter, don't you dare pretend like you care about Harry!"
"I don't understand."
Scrimgeour started, but Draco was already staring him down. "You don't care about Harry's fate?" he snapped. "You just need him to serve a purpose. What makes you think for one moment that we'd ever trust you of all people with his well-being? He's a person, and he has people who love him. People who care whether he makes it out alive or not, and we'll take care of it ourselves. So thanks, but no thanks. Stay away from him!" He could feel Harry's eyes on him, but he could not look at him, not right now. His gaze was locked on Scrimgeour's, whose expression was hard.
So I take it,
He asked, turning to Harry.
that the request I made at Christmas.
What request? Oh, yeah.
Harry rolled his eyes.
The one where I told the world what a great job you are doing in exchange for
raising everyone's morale!
Scrimgeour snapped, less composed by the second. Harry scoffed.
released Stan Shumpike yet.
Draco snorted when the minister just turned an interesting shade of purple, refraining from... Draco snorted when the minister just turned an interesting shade of purple, but refrained from answering.
I see you are
Dumbledore's man through and through.
Harry filled in, rather proudly.
That's right.
And that was that. Scrimgeour glared at both of them for another moment before taking off, much to Draco's relief. It did not take long, though, for Hermione and Weasley to appear in his stead, asking what he'd wanted. Draco left it to Harry to explain, instead taking deep, calming breaths to soothe his own temper. He was startled into a laugh when Weasley pleaded with Hermione.
Look, let me go back in there, Percy.
No! Hermione shook her head, grabbing his arm to keep him in place.
It'll make me feel better.
We could probably hit him with a hex from here, Draco snorted. He'd never know.
Not as satisfying.
Weasley sighed longingly, and Draco shrugged because... Well, silence fell upon them, and they strolled a little farther down the path, away from the crowds.
I can't bear the idea that we might never come back,
Hermione muttered, her eyes fixed on the castle.
How can Hogwarts close?
Maybe it won't, Weasley said. We're not in any more danger here than we are at home, are we? Everywhere's the same now. I'd even say Hogwarts is safer. There are more wizards inside to defend the place. What do you reckon, Harry? I'm not coming back even if it does reopen,
Harry said, absolutely not to Draco's surprise. Weasley, though, must have been clueless because he was gaping at Harry in shock. Hermione, on the other hand, looked sad but resigned.
I knew you were going to say that,
she sighed.
But then what will you do?
I'm going back to the Dursleys once more, because that's what Dumbledore wanted me to do,
Harry said.
But it'll be a short visit, and then I'll be off for good.
But where will you go if you don't come back to school?
I thought I might go back to Godric's Hollow,
Harry muttered, glancing at Draco, meeting his eyes hesitantly. Draco squeezed his hand, signaling his silent support for whatever he wanted to do.
For me, it started there, all of it. I've just got a feeling I need to go there, and I can visit my parents' graves. I'd like that.
Oh, then what? Weasley asked.
And then I've got to track down the rest of the Horcruxes, haven't I?
Harry sighed.
That's what Dumbledore wanted me to do. That's why he told me all about them. If Dumbledore was right, and I'm sure he was, there are still 4 of them out there. Draco and I will track them down and destroy them, and then I've got to go after the 7th bit of Voldemort's soul, the bit that's still in his body, and I'm the one who's going to kill him. And if I meet Severus Snape along the way, he added rather grimly, so much the better for me, so much the worse for him.
A long silence followed his words, in which Hermione caught Draco's eyes. They communicated silently before she looked at Weasley, having another telepathic conversation in front of an oblivious Harry. Draco knew what was coming before they opened their mouths.
We'll be there, Harry, Weasley said.
What? Harry asked, eyes wide.
At your aunt and uncle's house with Malfoy.
Weasley shrugged.
And then we'll go with you wherever you're going.
No! Harry shook his head, about to fight them like he had fought Draco, but Hermione cut him off, smart girl that she was.
You told us once before, she reminded him, that there was time to turn back if we wanted to. We've had time, haven't we?
We're with you, whatever happens, Weasley emphasized. But mate, you're going to have to come round my mum and dad's house before we do anything else. Even Godric's Hollow.
Why? Harry asked, stomped.
Billy Fleur's wedding, remember?
Draco laughed, startled. Right, he muttered. Can't miss that, or we'll be made into bouillabaisse. Harry blinked, then nodded.
Yeah,
he agreed.
We shouldn't miss that.
And that was that. They were going to go on a quest to save the world in a couple of weeks. But first, a wedding, because priorities. Draco squeezed Harry's hand as they continued their way up to the castle, maybe for the last time.